I guarantee you right now that there's at least one person watching this who just heard you say, see what your peers are doing, and they're thinking, well, I don't care about any of this stuff because I'm just going to go to the cloud, right? Like Microsoft does in their commercials. So what's up with that? I mean, what do you think the impact of Office 365 and other cloud-based solutions is going to be on how we do e-discovery?
I look at it in two different ways. I mean, from a business process point of view, cost-benefit analysis, the cloud is wonderful. I mean, obviously, it takes a lot of the stress and strain off of especially small businesses, their IT department, and definitely has cost benefits. From the side of litigation, from the side of e-discovery, it is a challenge, I think, for organizations. Mostly because you have lost control of your data. Now, it depends. We've talked a little bit about the mixed mode environments where some data is kept locally, or maybe they control their own cloud environment. That's a little bit different. You have control over your data. You can do whatever you want with it, theoretically. When you are going to a third-party solution, however, I think is when the challenges start to come in, because there's a number of areas that really are not covered by basic deployments. And unless you're very, very clear when you negotiate your SLA, you might not know that it can or cannot do certain things. The perfect example is searching your data. I mean, just from the very beginning, the key core competency of collecting data based on certain types of keywords, that's what I mean by searching data, retention, mitigation, hold. How is it implemented in your third-party vendor? And if they cannot clearly articulate that and clearly tell you the steps that you need to take when a litigation comes up as the IT admin, then there's going to be a problem when an actual case comes up. So even before you sign that agreement, you want to go through them. Okay, now how would I go ahead and go about putting a litigation hold in? How do you implement retention policy? What are your data destruction policies? How do you back up your data if they back up their data? That sort of thing. All these types of things, stuff that you would have internally in your organization covered by policies out to wazoo, you have to make sure they're doing the same thing. And more to the point, not just that they're doing them, that you understand what they're doing, because in the end, you might not have physical control of that data, but you do have legal liability for that
That's
data.
a really good point, because it's still your data. Now, the hosting provider, Google and Facebook, and some of the other internet-oriented companies are notorious for this. The hosting company or the hosting provider may claim ownership of the data.
Exactly.
But what that means normally is that they have the ability to do with it what they want to. It doesn't mean that it's not like a barrel of hazardous waste. If I give you a barrel of hazardous waste, it's yours now, and it's your problem. On the other hand, if I divide it into two barrels and I keep one and I give you one, then we both have a problem, and that's the situation we're in with these cloud systems. That I can still be responsible for the contents of that data if someone is misusing one of my systems, if they're harassing or stealing or you name it. But also I'm responsible if I am required to produce some of that data and I call my hosting company and say, I need litigation hold for this user, let's say, and they say, oh, sorry, we can't do that. Or we turned that on, and then in the event when you get ready to do a discovery, there's no actual data there. The judge is probably not going to accept you pointing the finger at your hosting company and say, oh, it's their fault.
No, and there's case study out there already, cases that have been decided that no, it comes down to the company is responsible for their own data.
That's a very interesting area that I'm going to keep an eye on, because if the safe harbor exemption gives you some protection against routine business operations, then it seems like you ought to be able to make the argument that if you're moving those routine business operations to somebody else, that your company is acting in good faith. And if the hosting company is incompetent or careless or whatever, why should you be punished? That's not going to fly.
No, sorry, no.
That's why I'm not a lawyer.
Due diligence is due diligence on your part that your data is up there, is being hosted. One of the more interesting cases, even before the cloud, is backup. You said, I have backup, this is my backup policy, here's how it works. What if you can't access your backups? And that's not going to excuse you either. Now, sometimes backups, of course, are covered under unreasonable, but when you have your data up in a cloud, it's not unreasonable to expect that you can get your data back. So believe me, it's not going to fly, and it hasn't. I mean, there's cases out there of third-party providers or what have you. People contract out work to different things they expect it being done. It's not an excuse if it's not done. You are responsible for that data. It comes back to that. And keep in mind that your third-party vendors can also be subpoenaed for the data. So you might be subpoenaed, but so can they, completely outside of your knowledge. So another thing you want to make sure with your third-party data is that you are notified when they're subpoenaed for someone to collect your data. Because if you're involved in a suit or a government inquiry, what have you, you'd like to know about it. So there has to be a process on both ways going back
and I'm guessing that it would look badly, it would reflect badly on you if the data that comes back from the hosting company and the data that come back from your subpoena don't match. I
Yes.
think that there have been a couple of high-profile cases where Company A and Company B were involved in a suit, and Company A was able to say, okay, we have these emails from people at Company B that did not show up in discovery requests from Company B, so it gave the appearance, at least, that they had thrown those away or that they had
Yeah, or-
spoiled that evidence.
Exactly. And you can never tell, it's very challenging to tell whether something's done in good faith or if it's done on purpose. So when you have a case like that, how are you going to go to the judge and say, whoops, sorry? No, you really have to have your ducks in a row on that one. And I think another really key area that you have to be aware of here is that the jurisdiction where your data is being hosted might be different than the jurisdiction where you reside.
That's a good point. One of the things Microsoft has done that I think is really interesting is they have defined, or they've publicized, I guess, where their data centers are. And so they make it known to customers that if you're in one of these geographies, then your data is going to be hosted here. And if you're in one of these other geographies, most providers don't do that. I mean, for example, if you ask Google, where's my Gmail data being hosted, they're going to, number one, if you could find a person to talk to, which you can't, but if you could, they're just going to laugh in your face. They, assuming they know, which is not a given, that's not something that they routinely disclose even to their business customers. And I think the same is true for many other hosting providers.